So I recently did something that I've been wanting to do for a long time, and that's to record a nice version of my original piece for solo double bass called Leanne Marie. If you go to any streaming service now and just search Leanne Marie Jacob Warren, you should be able to find it. Or if you want to support me more directly, you can check out my Bandcamp where I've got the non-compressed high-quality audio files available for purchase. So in this video, I'm also going to do something that I've wanted to do for a while, which is to take a little bit of a deep dive into the sheet music for that piece that I published about a year ago. First of all, I want to say a big thank you to everyone that's purchased the sheet music for Leanne Marie over the past year. It really means a lot that people are interested in giving something that I wrote a try, and I really appreciate all the interest that I've had in this piece and in my music. For those of you that are unfamiliar with my piece, Leanne Marie, I'll put a link in the description down below to a performance video so you can see the piece and see how the double harp harmonic technique is executed. And if you're interested in giving it a try, I'll also have a link down there to purchase the sheet music on my website, and then you can come on back to this video and dive in with us on the ins and outs of this piece. In order to start working on this piece, there are really two main things that we'll need to talk about first. One of them is the harp harmonic technique, and the other is the tuning system that you'll need to use in order to accomplish the piece. For harp harmonics, I do have a couple of lesson videos already on my YouTube that go into the mechanics of them a bit more in depth, but for right now, we'll kind of just talk about the basic idea of the harp harmonic. So, as the name might imply, it's a technique that we've borrowed from harp players, and the way harpists will accomplish this technique is by placing their thumb on a harmonic note on one of their strings. They'll be able to activate that node, and then with another finger, they'll be able to pluck to the side to play that harmonic, accomplishing essentially a one-hand harmonic. This is also used by guitar players and sometimes electric bass players as well, so it's not unheard of, but it's a very fun technique to use on double bass, especially since we have such a long string length, which means we can accomplish playing a lot of partials. Jumping into the technique of playing harp harmonics, there are really two components that you need to understand. One is that we use our thumb to activate a harmonic node. In this case, I'm going to activate the octave harmonic of my G string, and I'm going to reach down with either my third or second finger and pluck to the side. So the first part is the thumb activating the node. The second part is the finger reaching down to pluck the harmonic. And what's cool is that what you can do with the left hand, you can also do with the right hand. So I'm going to activate the node with my thumb on the right hand, reach down, and pluck to the side. So that's the basic technique of playing harp harmonics on the instrument, and Leanne Marie, as you'll find out, is really an extension of imagining what can happen when those two hands start to use these techniques independently to play melodies and different accompaniments. So the other thing that we need to talk about at the beginning is the tuning system that we're going to use for this piece. Because this piece explores the use of two-handed harp harmonics, I wanted to tune the instrument in a way that gave me harmonic nodes on my string that adhered to a tonality that I wanted to write in. So to that end, I actually retuned my bass in order to change the key that I was able to play in using natural harmonics. So I normally perform this piece on a modified high C bass. If you're not familiar, high C bass is basically a bass that's just tuned a fourth up from standard tuning. But what's different about my version of that instrument is that I have a high C string on the top and 3 solo strings on the bottom. This piece can be performed actually on any tuning. It can be performed on regular high C tuning, solo tuning, or orchestral tuning. You'll just need to make 2 changes to your tuning. The first is that you'll need to lower the pitch of your top string, your highest string, by 1 whole step. So I'm playing this on an orchestrally tuned bass right now. That means I started out with a G for my high string, and I actually lowered it down to an F. And then the second change that you'll have to make is that you'll need to raise your low string up 1 half step. So I started off with an E, and I raised it up to match that F as well. So you'll notice I have a high F string and a low F string. The 2 middle strings are just going to remain the same. So I've still got an A and a D here. I wrote all of the possible tunings on the first score. And that's the next thing I want to talk about, is the fact that I included multiple scores. Because when you're working with scordatura and multiple hands, it can get a little bit confusing to learn this piece, so I tried to make it as simple as possible for someone who's unfamiliar using this two-handed technique to learn. And so I included, to that end, 4 different scores. The first of which is what I call the standard reading score. Now, the standard reading score is basically you're just going to read that score down as if you hadn't changed your tuning. And if you did scordatura and read it down, it would come out completely correct. It would sound exactly like the piece. Now, if you're a little bit confused and don't know what one pitch is supposed to sound like, I included one score for each different tuning, one for orchestral tuning, one for solo tuning, and one for high C tuning that show the actual pitches that should be sounding when you are in scordatura. So I imagine for most people, they're going to read the standard reading score and reference the at-pitch score if they need to clarify something. But I tried to make everything as clear as possible on the standard reading score. The other big thing that was important to me is finding some way to be very clear about where you play specific harmonics, because there are multiple places on the instrument where you can get the same harmonic or the same pitched harmonic. But it's very important which string you use when playing this piece so that they ring over each other appropriately and also leave strings available for other pitches that you need to play. So I decided that the easiest way to notate this was to use Roman numerals. So I use the Roman numeral 1 to denote the highest string. I use 2 for the second highest. I use 3 for the third. And then I use 4 for the lowest string on the instrument. So when you see a harmonic and you see a Roman numeral, you know that you should play that harmonic on that string. The other thing that's a little non-standard about reading a piece like this is that since it is a two-handed piece, we have to write it out kind of like a pianist would read, meaning that there are actually two different stabs, one that deals with what the left hand does, the other that deals with what the right hand does. So in this piece, the left hand deals with the top line and the right hand deals with the bottom line. There's just a couple more details that we need to figure out and then we can jump into the piece itself. The last few things that I needed to have in order to write this piece down was some way of notating when a note was a harmonic versus when it was an open string. Technically, an open string is a harmonic, but it's the first harmonic or the first partial. And so we normally think of them as non-harmonic notes. And the other thing I needed to be able to notate was false harmonics. So I decided since most of the pitches in this entire piece are harmonics, I would just use normal note heads to denote harmonics, meaning whenever you see a normal standard note head, that always is going to mean play a harp harmonic. That left me with having to figure out a way to denote when we need to play open strings. So I decided to use a note head with an X through it to show open strings when they come up in the piece. Okay, that's more than enough setup, so why don't we jump into the piece itself. I'm going to use this video to jump through the parts that I think are the most challenging or the most confusing in the music, so we're not going to look at everything in the piece, just a selection of spots as we continue on here. Looking at the beginning, you'll notice that we just start with a very simple fermata over an F chord setting up the main tonality. We already see some of the notations that I was talking about coming into play. First, we're going to look at the left hand to understand how you might go about learning this piece and reading it down. So in the left hand, you'll see that I want you to play a G. And again, normal note heads are always harp harmonics. So it says a G note, a G harmonic, on the first string. So I'll find that node for the G harmonic, and I'll activate it with my left hand. And then if we look at the right hand, you'll notice that it's an E note with an X note head, which means it should be the low E played as an open string. And then you'll see the Roman numeral denoting, yes, that is the fourth string. So if we play those two at the same time, you'll get open low string and that harmonic G to make that. And then going on, we'll start to see that these Roman numerals will be very useful in positioning certain pitches. We go on to play that G, that high G harmonic a couple of times in the left hand, but we also now need to add in the A and the E harmonics, which are clarified as the A on the second string and the E on the third string. So I still use the left hand to activate this G, but now I also need to activate the A on the second string and the E on the third string. And so the way that I usually like to accomplish this, you could do it a number of ways, but I'll play this left hand pitch, and then I'll sort of bar over these two. I'll put my thumb over the A and the E, and I will pluck the A with my index finger, and I'll pluck the E with my middle finger. And that lets me kind of pretend like I'm finger picking a guitar, essentially, but between two hands. And you'll find it very useful for this time and the time that speeds up a little bit later on in the piece. The next spot I want to look at is measure 5, just to illustrate something that's going to be important throughout the piece. And that is when you have to play a harp harmonic on a string that you already have ringing. You need to prepare yourself by being ready and in the vicinity of being able to play that harp harmonic. But if you activate the node too soon, you're going to mute the harmonic that was previously ringing. So in this place, we have this collection of octaves. We do 3 different sets of octaves with harp harmonics. And it's very important to get your hands ready for the next ones, but make sure you don't activate them too soon. I'll show you what I mean. So if I play that little roll that comes before, so it's those 3 sets of octaves there that I'm talking about. If we play and accidentally activate the new node before that one is done ringing, we'll kind of mute the sound. So I often try to get my hands positioned, floating, just within reach of playing the next harmonics, and let them ring as long as I possibly can until I have to activate the next harmonics. And this applies, again, not just to this section, but it's something to keep in mind as you go through the piece, because the beauty of using this technique is that we can actually get these notes to ring over each other. And I made a lot of choices about which string to play harmonics on in order to get those ring over effects throughout the piece. After we finish this intro section, the tempo comes in at measure 10, and things get a little bit simpler for a while. We have a pulsing rhythm in the right hand and melodies in the left hand, sounding something like this. So on and so forth. We'll get different variations throughout this section. The next spot I want to jump to is measure 24. Now, measure 24 shows a little bit of cross-hand voicing, meaning that the line that is being played actually has to be divided between 2 hands. So it looks a little complicated, but if we break it down, it shouldn't be that bad. I'm just going to look at the last 2 eighth notes of this bar and show you how to break it down. First of all, in the right hand, we have an A harmonic that should be played on the 2nd string. So we can find that. And then we'll look and see, okay, the next event that needs to happen is that we need a G harmonic on the 1st string. We'll figure out how to position that. Then we need an E harmonic on the 3rd string, figure out how to position that. And finally, we need a D harmonic on the 2nd string. And so when you put it together, you get, and then eventually speeding it up. So I'll play from the bar before for just a bit of context, a little under tempo. Looking ahead to when the B theme comes in at measure 30, you'll notice that we start to use more open strings more often. So looking at this section, you'll see that in the right hand, there's a lot of motion between the open E string and different harmonics on that E string. I find that for learning this piece, it's helpful to not only figure out how to use both hands together, but often to just start by learning one hand on its own, almost like you might tackle a piano piece at the beginning, just looking at what one hand does before adding in the second hand. So looking at 30 here, you might start by figuring out what the right hand needs to accomplish. It needs to play this open string 3 times, and then we need to find the harmonic that is the 3rd partial, or the B, on the same string, and then play the open string again, and then play the octave harmonic, or the 2nd partial. So putting that together sounds like this. Now there is one thing in this section that might be a bit confusing, and that's bar 33, where we actually need to play a B flat on the 4th string. Now we're only able to play this B flat because we're not doing anything with the left hand at that moment. So the left hand starts off this bar by playing the A harmonic on the 2nd string, and then quickly moving to capo or hold down the B flat on the low string, allowing us to play those 5 B flat notes. So putting that together, it's going to be... And now this kind of brings up an interesting situation where I needed to play the melody part and the bass part, but my hands were so far away from their targets that it actually made more sense for the right hand to momentarily take over the role of melody and the left hand to take over the role of the bass. just until I could get back to the positions that made sense. We're starting off the bar by having the right hand play the melody note E on the 3rd string. And then we're using the left hand to play the open E string with a left hand pizzicato. So putting that together, we have. So the next time my left hand will be needed is to play the octave harmonic on my G string. And so as I'm doing that left hand pizzicato, I'm already trying to migrate my left hand to where it's going to be needed next. So you'll see this motion. And then I can keep playing the open string with the right hand. Looking ahead to bar 38, we have the use of the 5th partials in our left hand. So that will be like the B harmonic on the G string or the top string, and the F sharp harmonic on the 2nd string. Now, as you start to activate higher and higher partials, basically what's happening on the string is that the vibrating portion of the string when you activate it is getting smaller. This means that you might need to experiment with the distance between your thumb and the plucking finger in order to activate that harmonic well. The position of the node doesn't change. We'll find that underneath the B on the top string. So I'll activate it with my thumb. And now I'm going to reach down with my left hand and experiment with different distances to see how well it activates that partial. So I find that a slightly smaller distance on this bass feels good, and then I can keep that same spacing to play the other 5th partial on the 2nd string. In addition to exploring double-handed harp harmonic technique through this piece, I also wanted to write something that explored using changes in polyrhythm as a way of developing an idea. Now, because you're using mostly natural harmonics, I'm very limited in the tonalities that I'm actually able to call upon. So it's hard to create some sort of musical development throughout the duration of a piece when you're really locked into a very finite amount of notes that are going to speak well on your instrument. We're going to go at bar 42, and you'll notice here we're cycling the old polyrhythm of 3 against 2 for a few measures before making the change to the new polyrhythm of 3 against 4. When I make these polyrhythmic changes, I'm not really super focused on keeping the tempo the same. In fact, I think I deliberately changed the tempo in order to achieve the sort of excitement or relaxation that I want given the change. And for this one specifically, I like to push the tempo a little bit when I make the change to 3 against 4. Sounds something like this. I find page 3 and this particular polyrhythm set to be one of the most difficult to accomplish and learn in the piece. It's a culmination of a lot of the techniques we've been setting up, which is basically using open strings in combination with harp harmonics, having voice crossing and all that kind of stuff working together. So I think in order to work on this, it would be really beneficial to slowly learn one hand at a time and then trying to put those together in small cells in order to pull them off, almost like you're basically choreographing a dance. I often think about it that way. I've got 2 dancers and they've got to be in the right place at the right time. Otherwise, the note that I'm going for is not even physically possible. So taking your time and really figuring out what that dance feels like is going to help you be able to play this piece in a much more fluid way. The only thing that's technically new on page 3 is if we look at bar 56 on beat 3, that's the first time that we get the notation of having a false harmonic. I use slashes to denote which hand holds down the note required for the false harmonic. So in this case, if we look at the left hand, on beat 3, we're supposed to be holding our left hand on a D harmonic. And then if we look at the right hand, it's supposed to be playing the A harmonic, and the diamond note head shows what the resulting pitch should be, which will be that high A harmonic. So if I find that D, making sure that I'm right on it, and then I find that A with my thumb, and if I pluck, looking for a high note, I can activate the octave higher version of that A. So in context, that whole measure. So moving on now to the final page of the piece, we get a polyrhythm change from 4/3 to 5/3. If you look in bar 64 at the end of page 3, you'll see that I am basically cycling that polyrhythm and then make the change at the top of the page. Now for this one personally, I do keep the tempo similar. The old eighth note becomes the quintuplet or the 5 in the right hand for the next polyrhythm. So that sounds something like this. So you can see that that rhythm is consistent in the right hand, and I change tempos in the left hand to accommodate the new 3. Looking ahead to bar 70, we'll see that we get the B part melody in the left hand with a repetitive quintuplet drone in the right hand on the open low string. Now if you look at the melody, there is actually a pitch in that melody, the third pitch, that needs to be played on the low string that is already playing the open drone note. But it's nice because in the 5/3 polyrhythm, that third note of the 3 actually comes in between 2 of the quintuplets. So it actually is possible to play that note on the low string in between pizzicatos of the open string with your right hand. Finally, to finish out this piece, we have a couple more polyrhythmic transitions. First to an easy one, which is just 6/3, or I guess 1/2 technically. And then we finally get 8/3 at the end of the piece, ending again with that same octave that we began the piece with. So if you're interested in giving this a try, I would go check out the performance video that I have linked down below. Go stream the single that I released of it in the high C tuning that I mentioned before. And yeah, if you're interested, you can always purchase the sheet music from my website and come back to this video as reference. Also, feel free to reach out with any questions. I'd love to chat with anyone who's interested in learning about this technique. The last thing I want to note is that I also have another piece written for double-handed harp harmonic technique called Zola. And Zola, I would say, is the easier of these pieces that I've written so far, and would be a great one if you're a little intimidated by starting right out the gate with something more complex like Leanne Marie. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video, whether you're going to play this piece or we're just interested in learning about some of the things that make it tick. I'm really glad that you're interested in my music. And yeah, see you in the next one.